Earlier this year, we featured an interview with journalist Renee Pellerin about her new book, Conspiracy of Hope. The gist of the book was that too many women are going for unnecessary breast mammograms, which offer up too many false positives and negatives, and at the end of the day, do little to save lives. It was a controversial book and prompted a dissenting email to us from Dr. Paula Gordon, a clinical professor in the radiology department at the University of British Columbia and senior radiologist at the Sadie Diamond Breast Program at BC Women's Hospital. So, in the interests of equal time, Dr. Gordon joins us now with the other side of the debate. Nice to have you here.
Happy to be here.
You came a long way to be with us today, so we're grateful to have you in that chair. Let's start with this. How accurate is the information that you get when you do a mammogram?
Mammograms are not a perfect test, but we know that women who have mammograms are 40 to 60% less likely to die of breast cancer than women who don't have mammograms. They have strengths and limitations like any test, and we know some of the workarounds now for the limitations. So mammograms don't find all cancers, we know that. But there are other tests that can help. And one of the issues I hope we're going to talk about a little bit today is women with dense breasts and how mammograms can miss lots of cancers in women with dense breasts. But other tests can find those cancers. So it's important for women to know when they have dense breasts and when they should maybe talk to their doctor about getting these other tests as well.
We'll get to those other tests in a moment. I still want to have you have an opportunity to address some of the issues that Renee Pellerin made in her book. Are there, for your liking, still too many false negatives and false positives with a mammogram?
There are about 7 to 12% false positives, and I don't even like the term false positive. I call it a false alarm. To me, a false positive is when we tell you you have cancer and you don't. On the other hand, just as mammograms don't find all cancers, they show lots of other stuff that's not cancer, like cysts. That's a fluid-filled lump that's not cancer, or other benign kinds of things. And sometimes when we see one of those on a mammogram, we want to take some extra tests just to make even more sure that it's not cancer. So very much, it's a better safe than sorry process.
Gotcha.
So about the first time a woman has a mammogram is the time when she's most likely to have a false alarm because we have no prior mammograms on her to compare with. After that, it drops. And just like Pap tests or any other test for that matter, people generally understand that there are these false alarms, and I think we can do a better job warning women before they go for a mammogram that they might have a false alarm. But of all the women that get called back for more tests, only a small percentage of them actually turn out to have cancer.
One of the things Renee also suggested was that the whole breast screening phenomenon has not just become science, but it has also become sort of overly laden with all kinds of emotional baggage, which which obscures its value, she would suggest. Your view on that?
Breast cancer is emotional, but we have loads of science. And we know that finding cancer early saves lives. But something that also isn't talked about enough is that when we find breast cancer early, it gives women more choices for their treatment. So for example, if you don't have a mammogram and the way you have your cancer is found is that you find it as a lump, it's typically much larger than it would be if we found it on a mammogram. And so a woman might be told, we really can't do a lumpectomy, you're going to need a mastectomy. So early detection allows us to do more conservative surgery. If the cancer is found when it's already spread to the lymph nodes, women often need surgery on the armpit. And when it's found earlier, they can have a much less invasive procedure. And the problem with the armpit surgery is that there's a very high incidence of something called lymphedema. That's when women get swelling of the arm and hand on that side, and it's permanent. So if we could avoid that surgery with early detection, that's a huge plus.
And you think mammograms can do that?
Yes, they can.
They can.
And also, when we find cancer early, many women don't need chemotherapy. So this is all over and above the life-saving aspect of doing mammograms and the other tests that we're going to talk about.
That we are going to talk about. At what age do you believe it makes sense for women to start having mammograms?
It's not what do I believe. The data shows that you save the most lives if you start at 40 and ideally screen annually. And even panels that don't recommend that, they know that that's how you save the most lives, but they've added their value judgments to that with respect to the false alarms and the overdiagnosis and those sorts of things.
Renee cited, when she was here earlier this year, a study of 90,000 Canadian women under the age of 50, and the conclusion she says this study came to was that no lives were actually saved because of those tests. In your view, is that a methodologically sound study?
Absolutely not, and it's been roundly criticized by experts around the world. The principal investigators of that research, they meant really well, but the study was poorly designed. They broke the rules of how to do that kind of research. That research is called a randomized controlled trial, and they broke the basic rules.
Which is what?
That you should know that the two groups of women, in their case, the groups having the mammograms and those not having the mammograms, should be equal. And where they erred is that all the women who came forth and volunteered to participate had a breast exam first. Now, you're Miss Jones coming to volunteer for the study, and Mrs. Smith comes in, and you do a breast exam on her, and you find lumps. Not only do you find a lump in her breast, you find them in her armpit, which is very suspicious for it being a cancer that's actually spread to the lymph nodes already. Are you going to let her go in the group that doesn't get the mammogram?
You think that kind of patient was screened out?
They were, and no, quite the opposite. The nurses were well-meaning, but potentially naive. They didn't realize how this was going to impact the outcome of the study. And many of those women, not all necessarily, but many of those women got put in the mammogram group instead of the control group. Now, at the end of the day, if you put more women with cancer in the mammogram group, there are going to be more women who have cancer in the mammogram, who die of breast cancer. And predictably, and it didn't even take until the preliminary results came out, the experts who reviewed everything ahead of time said, this is really going to mess up. And it surely turned out that more women died who had mammograms than in the control group.
But you think it skewed the study?
Absolutely, it corrupted it. And it doesn't matter how many years you follow those women, you can't fix that. You break that basic rule.
Let's show a clip from the interview that we did with Renee earlier this year, in which she says that there has been a massive, I think she used the term healthcare industry, that has developed around breast cancer screening and continues with a kind of momentum of its own. Sheldon, if you would.
When you've vested your life in something, and your entire community is in the same box as you, there's an element of, it's not an ego or even arrogance. I think there's an element of
tunnel vision?
Tunnel vision, groupthink, I think, can come into play. And it's very hard for somebody who wants to be a critical thinker in that environment to question. And I don't think it's not just radiologists. I think we see that in different areas in the medical profession where it's very difficult to challenge something which is, becomes part of the status quo.
Your response?
Well, she's talking about studies that were done between the 1960s and the early 90s. And there's a wealth of data since then. So it's not a question of me or anybody else being vested. In fact, you could say the same thing about the people that ran that trial, that they spent $20 million of taxpayer dollars to run that study. And they're, to this day, defending it and denying that any corruption took place. But there's piles of data to show the value of mammography. And for example, the study that was done in Canada called the Pan-Canadian study involved almost 3 million women. And they're the ones that showed that you reduce mortality, deaths from breast cancer, by 40 to 44%. In fact, the younger women, the women 40 to 49, they were the higher, the 44% mortality reduction number. And one number that wasn't looked at by any of those trials was the years of life you save when you find a cancer early. So for example, it's great if we find an early breast cancer in a woman in her 70s, because we might save 20 years of life if she could live to 90, let's say. But when we find a cancer early in a woman in her 40s, we're going to save 50 years of life. So.
But what about the notion that she puts forward that there's a kind of a momentum, an industrious momentum behind screening? There are many vested interests out there, corporate vested interests as well.
Yes, but we have data. It's not me saying what I believe. It's what does the data show? What does the science show? And there are loads of people who are not. You could say, well, I have a conflict of interest because I earn money reading mammograms. Well, that's true, even though I'm trying to retire. Somebody like me who's worked in this field for over 35 years, I've seen it all. I've seen the women who came in with a big cancer who didn't have a mammogram, and I've seen the saves, the small cancers that we found at screening. But we don't base recommendations on those anecdotal cases. We look at the aggregate of hundreds of thousands of women in all these studies, and we know that screening saves lives, 40 to 60%.
And you've been telling us throughout the interview that there are other things people can do as well. For example?
So, the issue of dense breasts, those are the women whose cancers are much more likely to be missed on a mammogram. So if a woman knows that she has dense breasts, everybody should do breast self-exam, but she should particularly, because she might be the one to find her cancer. And if she's doing deliberate breast self-exam periodically, it doesn't have to be every single month, but maybe she'll find her cancer earlier than if she bumped into it by accident in the shower one day.
Forgive the stupidity of this question, but do all women know whether they do or don't have dense breasts?
That's a wonderful question. Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
It's information that's available only from a mammogram. So you can't tell by feel. If your doctor does a breast exam, they cannot tell if you have dense breasts or not. So you can see it on a mammogram, and the information's there, but to this point is not being shared with women. So British Columbia became the first province last October to tell all women what their breast density was. Ontario tells women who have the highest category. Now, we divide breast density into 4 categories. And in Ontario, for example, women with the highest category of density are told that they can have a mammogram every year instead of every other year. But the women in the 3rd highest category, who also have dense breasts, they're led to believe that they don't. And they need to know that they have dense breasts. There are 2 risks associated. Number 1, as I told you, the risk that they could have a cancer and it would be missed. But number 2, the denser the breast, the higher the risk that that woman will even get breast cancer.
So
it's kind of a double whammy. The alternative is to do breast self-exam, so you find it as early as possible. And we now know that other tests like ultrasound and MRI can find the cancers that are missed on the mammogram before they're big enough to feel.
If you have dense breasts, can you go to your doctor and say, if you discover as a result of a mammogram that that's the case, I need an MRI for this or I need an ultrasound, and Ontario's health insurance plan will pick it up? No. You got to pay for that out of your own pocket.
Apparently, that's the case. Now, in British Columbia, even though they started telling women in October whether they have dense breasts or not, it took till January before our provincial health insurance, the equivalent of OHIP, picked up the tab. And Ontario, my understanding is, first of all, loads of doctors, even if their patients ask them, will not give them a requisition just because they don't understand. The doctors haven't been educated about breast density. We have to do that. We have to educate women. So, for example, if you go to your doctor and you have high blood pressure, which is a risk for heart disease and stroke and so on, your doctor's going to tell you. If you have dense breast tissue, your doctor doesn't even know that they should tell you. So we have a lot of educating to do, but the data is there. In the United States, they're 10 years ahead of us. And Connecticut was the first state to start telling women if they have dense breasts. And they've been doing breast ultrasound now since 2009 in high volumes. And they're finding an additional 3 to 4 cancers. This is after the mammogram. So when women with dense breasts whose mammograms were negative, they're finding 3 to 4 cancers per 1,000 women screened. And these are the cancers we need to find. They're real cancers. They're not precancers. And they're small, and they're not yet spread to the lymph nodes. So that's where you're going to save lives.
Let me ask you about the dose of radiation that a woman receives when she goes for a mammogram, and whether, if you start at 40 as opposed to 50, which you're recommending, which means you're going to be exposed to 10 years more radiation than somebody who starts at 50, whether that's healthy.
So the dose of radiation has come down over the decades, and now it is negligible starting at age 40. 40 is the sweet spot. 40 is the age where the incidence of breast cancer starts rising, And the effect of the radiation, because the breast is mature, is minimal, negligible in fact. And theoretically, you might cause a cancer with every 100,000 mammograms you do. But if you do the mammograms, you have a chance of finding it early and treating it. Whereas if you didn't do mammograms, it's 1 in 8 women that gets breast cancer. So the math doesn't work. If you really want to reduce your risks of dying of breast cancer, you should be having the mammograms.
One last thing. I know 99% of people who get breast cancer are women, but 1% are men. Any advice for them?
Well, in fact, there's just been a study released showing that men who are known to be at high risk because they have a breast cancer gene should possibly be having mammograms.
Can a man have a mammogram?
A man can have a mammogram, just like a small-breasted woman can have a mammogram. And because men don't have the dense breast tissue, the normal dense breast tissue that can hide cancers, in fact, they're almost easier to see. They are easier to see in a man's mammogram than in a woman's. But that's only men who have the breast cancer gene. Otherwise, what can men do? Just pay attention. I mean, don't do breast self-exam, but when you're in the shower and your hand is soapy and you run it over your chest, if you feel a lump, don't ignore it. Go to the doctor and get it checked.
Yeah, men don't do that. We ignore everything, right?
Yeah, well, we're working on that too. There's a men's health initiative in Canada going on, I'm sure you know.
Okay, last question here. We've got Renee Pellerin with this very long book, well-researched, making many, suggestions that there's a lot of suspicion around mammograms. And we have you who've worked in the field for decades telling us the exact opposite. What are we supposed to believe?
She did a lot of really good research, and her research is more about the history of mammography and the personalities involved, but it's not hard on science. And the general public and family doctors need to know the real science, which is out there. And it says that women are 40 to 60% less likely to die of breast cancer if they have mammograms. Now, we're not going to find all those cancers early. And there's new science showing that when women have dense breasts, if we offer them supplemental, not instead of mammography, but in addition, other tests like ultrasound, and if they're at really high risk, like women who have the breast cancer gene, they need MRIs, then we're going to find even more cancers early and make an even better impact on breast cancer.
Dr. Gordon, we appreciate you accepting our invitation to come in tonight, and we thank you for making the trip from BC.
You're most welcome.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.